Oh, yeah.
Bless and love, my lords. Welcome to another Punks Talk by Red Lion. It is an absolute pleasure to have Galbraith with me today on the studio, let's say. How's it doing, my man? How are you?
Hey man, yeah, I'm good. I wasn't expecting that intro song.
Yes.
That was pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, no, interesting to listen along to that, and thanks for having me around today. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Great, man. Great. It was very, very nice to meet you in Paris.
Oh yeah, no, that was fantastic. Being able to hang out a little bit whilst we were there.
Mm.
Um, got to shake hands finally and share a few stories, which is always interesting. Looking forward to Lisbon as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gonna be awesome, man. We are so excited for that. We hit New York, Paris, and now Lisbon. I think the year is going great.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting one considering where we are. I guess as a community, as an industry, as a market.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty bleak times, right?
Yeah, like the evolution that we've seen and that we've kind of the road that we've all kind of walked the last couple of years
Mhm.
has been a pretty crazy one to say the least. And since I went to NFT NYC last year in June 2022, so nearly a year ago now. Yeah, it's quite colossally different. The last year was an interesting one because it started off so positively and ended up kind of so negatively for many reasons. With ultimately the collapse of FTX, which kind of I think a lot of people were thinking, "Oh God, I hope this is it. How worse can it get?" And then in the at the start of this year, things still started to trickle downwards even further. But the true ones are still around, I guess.
Mhm.
Still plugging away, and the believers are still here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's pretty dark times. We'll get into it a bit later. Let's start with something more lighthearted, and let's hear about your punk story. How did you get into punks?
Yeah, good question. It was well, I guess it's all interconnected and it relates a lot to how I just kind of got into NFTs in general and my experience of, I guess, Web3 and crypto, um, which goes back to, I guess, around 2017 when I first kind of aped in at the last top, as it might be kind of called, in like October, November 2017. I saw a few friends on Twitter first starting to talk about Web3 and crypto, and I bought some Bitcoin and some ETH at the peak in December 2017, I think it was.
You bought the top, right?
Yeah. I
Welcome to
absolutely bought
crypto.
it. Yeah, new to crypto, bought the hype, um, and then yeah, watched. I talked to a few friends, and they were like, "Yeah, man, it's the future." And I was like, amazing, yeah, this is cool. Let's print some money. Magic internet money machine goes, um, and yeah, so I bought it. I threw basically all my life savings at it at the time, and then watched it all go to pretty much zero.
Did you
But
have any investing experience, or you just love
no,
the idea? Yeah, okay, okay.
it was a funny one because I mean, like, I'd known about Bitcoin for a long time. When I was living in London years ago, I remember, oh God, even as far back as like 2014, 2015, there was like it was when vaping started to become a thing, and there was actually this kind of hipster sort of, or these days vape shops are just like these kind of generic, kind of cheap things, but back
Mhm.
then when it was first becoming a thing, they were quite. Uh, the area of London that I was living in Shoreditch, anyway, was quite like a hipster area. It's quite a sort of tech savvy. It was called the Silicon Roundabout of London, near Old Street, and there's a lot of startups there. And there's this little vape shop, and it had a Bitcoin machine. Well, it had a cash machine that accepted Bitcoin, and they accepted Bitcoin for their purchases. And this was like 2014. So I'd heard about it a long time ago, and then bought the top in 2017. Watched it all go to zero in 2018, but I didn't sell anything because I was like, well, there's no point in selling. Maybe it will come back someday. And then also I was like, no, this is pretty interesting. I kind of just got to watch what happens here. And then fast forward to, I guess, 2020. In the meantime, I'd started doing collaborations as a writer with digital artists. And in 2018, actually, I wanted to do this short story project called Neon and Concrete. And Neon and Concrete was divided into two kind of separate lines of stories. One was Neon, and Neon stories I wanted to be cyberpunk, sci-fi, you know, future retro sort of stories. And then the Concrete stories I wanted to be sci-fi again, but a little bit more cerebral, a little bit more philosophical. And I reached out to a couple of artists on Instagram to say, look, I love your art, and I'd love to I've got this idea for a project, and I'd love to write short stories based on your work. And one of the artists was called Ozzic, and he's still around today. Sold a few NFTs back in 2021, I think, and is still reasonably active on Instagram and Twitter. And those are his work I used for the Concrete stories, so the more cerebral sort of philosophical sci-fi. The other artist that I reached out to, and this is why it's relevant, is a guy called Beeple. And I reached out to Beeple in, I think it was like February 2018. And I said, look, your work's pretty awesome. I love like the cyberpunk sort of stuff that you do. I've got this idea for writing a collection of short stories. Can I use your work? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, man. He reached back out to me via Instagram. We had a quick conversation. He shared his Dropbox with me for all that high-res images. And I went to work writing short stories between 2,000 and 8,000 words based on between 3 and 6 of his images, literally using them as inspiration, but also integrating them into the stories that I was writing.
What year was that?
That was 2018.
2018, okay.
Yeah. So then,
way before he becomes famous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like he was. I remember at the time, I reached out to a few people that are pretty big in the space now, like Fuck Vendor and Stuzor and a couple of others, just to ask the same thing. Can I write short stories based on your work? I got a couple of replies. People were busy. Some people didn't reply. But Mike, replied to me straight away. He was like, yeah, this sounds awesome, man. And, he's like this quite extrovert sort of character, and his replies to me just really were amazing, and I've always appreciated that. And so I went to work and I wrote. I think in the end, the Neon and Concrete project had 13 short stories, which ranged between about 2,500 words and 10,000 words, and 7 of which of the stories were based on Beeple's work. And like you say, it was before he'd obviously sold his the $69 million Everyday's collage, but he was still pretty big in the space.
Yeah.
He was still one of the people with, like, at the time, one of the digital artists that I was aware of, at least, that had hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. Obviously these days it's millions, but back then hundreds of thousands was still a big deal. And I was just amazed that he got back to me and with such, encouragement and enthusiasm. And so, from that point on, like I worked a lot closer with digital artists, writing short stories based around their work. A couple of others in the space as well. And then in 2020, December 2020, I remember people was like talking a lot on his Instagram channel about his second drop on Nifty Gateway, and I missed the first.
No, it's, December 2020. Okay, yeah, that was the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I missed the first one, which I think was a couple of months before, maybe October, November, 2020, and but I remember him talking about it on his Instagram, and I was kind of following along and going, I don't really get this. I'm not sure what it is, and um, it seems kind of funny, and not really my thing. And then in December, he was like really hammering it on his Instagram. He's like, guys, this is the future. This is really interesting. This is kind of like, I was like, okay, maybe I'll start paying attention now. And then I remember he did the drop on Nifty Gateway, and I was like, you know what? It was like a confluence of things, because I'd been looking to invest in arts for quite some time anyway, but didn't really know where to start. The walls in my apartment are covered with like abstract expressionism. I love Rothko, Pollock, Bacon. All these
Chips
dead, yeah, all these dead abstract expressionist artists basically are my favorites. So I was like, maybe I should buy some art from some people that are alive, but I didn't really know where to start with it. And then like this NFT thing came along, and people's there going, this is the future. And I'm like, right, okay. So I popped him a message on Instagram. I was like, what is it? What am I buying a JPEG? What's going on? He's like, no, look, just go on Nifty Gateway. That's where the next drop is. Read all about it there. Google NFTs, and you'll find out more. I was like, right, okay, fair enough. So I started doing a little bit of digging, and then I bought my first NFT on Nifty Gateway for a second drop. It was the Into the Ether for $1,000. And I was like, what have I just done? Have I bought a JPEG? Like, how
That
does this
was an
work?
incredible buy back then. Like $1,000 for a JPEG in
Yeah,
2020 was an insane amount. Like
yeah, oh yeah.
nobody was paying that much money.
No,
It wasn't common.
no, it wasn't, and it was really strange. And and I was like, right, okay, but then I started, it started to click a little bit, because I remember watching Mike post stories on his Instagram about how many of these JPEGs he'd sold, and he was making a tally, because he dropped, I think it was like 3 or 4 open editions, maybe more. And I was like, wait a minute, he's just sold like
Yeah.
2,000.
He kicked us. That was the
Yeah.
first big drop with so much money involved.
Oh, it was insane, man. Because I just remember watching it, and like watching the ticker go up on the open editions, and it was like hundreds. He was selling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these open editions for $1,000 a time. And I was like, wait a minute, did he just make like $3 million in like 20 minutes? I was like, what the fuck is going on here? So I again started kind of digging a little bit more, and was like, right, maybe I should start paying attention to this. And then that's when I dropped back into Twitter, because I've been on Twitter since 2007, and I've seen it all over there. And I dropped out of Twitter a while ago because of the politics and how toxic the whole environment got. But I was starting to dip my toes back into it to try and re-engage with the writing community that was there. And whilst I was there and dipping my toes back into Twitter, I started seeing again digital artist friends that I knew from Instagram, and some of which I collaborated with, start to talk about NFTs. And I started to go on marketplaces like Super Rare and Maker's Place, and I was like, what I and Nifty Gateway. I was like, wait, okay, so I need a MetaMask. What's a MetaMask? And I need like, what's OpenSea? And I was just like digging and digging and digging, and that's when it all
consumed your life, didn't it?
well, from
I
that
can
point,
relate to that. I was like that the first days.
absolutely, man.
Yeah. I
From
was so captivated by this little micro scene with all the little brands that I had to learn and who is who. And I was like, what fucking universe did I uncover?
Absolutely, man. It was like Pandora's box. I kind of opened it, and I was like, wow, okay, this is This is pretty
There's
insane.
a lot of shit in here. This
Oh,
is interesting.
it blew my mind. And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the thing that really captivated me was this idea of provenance
Mm.
and how you could, through the blockchain, through smart contracts, attach provenance to a digital asset, essentially. And this is something that I'd never really thought of before or considered. You know, like I said, I've been friends with digital artists for a long time, and they made their living as people who worked for everything from, you know, marketing departments to graphic design agencies to, you know, illustrating for magazines or newspapers or whatever. And then they sold, you know, they were content creators, so they sold stickers or prints. They had Patreons, this sort of stuff to make their kind of, you know, side hustle
They
money.
sell mattresses, Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah, like everything, man.
Yeah.
And I knew it as a writer as well, how what the struggle was like.
Mm.
But then all of a sudden, these guys, these incredibly talented artists that were getting, you know, $5 for a print or, you know, $10 a month for a Patreon subscription, were starting to be able to sell their work with provenance via the blockchain, via smart contracts, via NFTs, for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
Mm.
And, or, you know, 10, 15, 20, 100 ETH, whatever. And I was like, this is cool, man. This is really cool. I really like this, you know. And as a sci-fi writer, and as somebody that is, you know, read Snow Crash multiple times, and you know, has Neuromancer as one of his favorite novels of all time, I've always been obsessed with cyberspace, the internet, the idea of the metaverse, what the future of the world will look like through our, you know, the digital personification of our actual selves and various other stuff. So once I started digging, there was like you said, there was no going back. There was a whole lot of stuff there, and I kind of just went with it from there. And I guess coming back to your original question, I you know, was in the space and I started buying NFTs via Nifty Gateway and started investing in digital art.
Mm.
I bought my Beeple and then I bought, you know, a bunch of other people that dropped on Nifty Gateway. Then I started buying things on different marketplaces and OpenSea. Then I started to think, how can I use this technology and how can I work with this community or how can I integrate myself into this marketplace in this industry as a writer? And is there a possibility for me to do something here? And like I said, you know, with my personal history of collaborating a lot over the years, my first novel was released in 2009. And as part of that release, I worked with 5 artists and 5 bands to create original music and art based around 5 themes of my novel. And I gave them each a 2,000 word extract based on different emotions: love, anger, madness, jealousy, and desire. And they went away and created original art or music based on this 2,000 word extract. And at the time, I had published my novel, a 72-page art book, a 5-track music album. I also did a 7-minute short film. We had an interactive art,
Mhm.
literature, and music exhibition in London where you could go into this exhibition and look at the art as well as read the source material or the extract from the novel and listen to the music all at the same time. And so this idea of collaboration, you know, is something that I've been doing for a long time. And I thought, how can I use this skill that I've got or this, you know, passion that I've got within this space? So I started reaching out to digital artists that I knew, going, "Oh, look, you know, do you need a writer? I'm thinking about starting my own project. Would you like to work with me?" And it kind of just, you know, took off from there basically. And then I think it was like
How
May.
did you find the punks from that?
Well, this was it. This was it. Like, because it was like maybe April, May 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I'd started looking at, you know, I guess they weren't even called PFP collections at the time. They were just collections. It was really before the big PFP kind of craze kind of
Mm.
kicked off, and I'd come across
Around
them.
the time when the apes came out.
It was a little bit earlier than that, actually. Maybe January, March, April, because and I'd come across punks a couple of times, and I'd seen some big names in the space
Well, they
talk.
weren't big back then, but yeah.
Well, I mean, like they weren't so big back then, but they were big for the time, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
So, like the people now, 4156, for instance, who had the ape with the blue bandana.
That guy's
He
not a punk anymore, though.
Not anymore, no. But the founder of Nouns, he was the blue bandana ape at the time,
Mm,
and he, at the time had tens of thousands of followers. When at the time, tens of thousands of followers was a huge amount. Unlike
mm,
now, where it's like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. Back then, it was like thousands and tens of thousands. So I started to kind of get an idea of what the punks were,
mm.
and then one infamous character who is kind of not so much around the space anymore. It was a guy called Beanie.
Beanie.
Yeah. And I was following Beanie quite
Bro,
closely.
that dude promised me he will give me an interview, but still hasn't came through. I'm really looking forward to that interview.
That would definitely be an interesting one, man. Because I was following him quite closely on Twitter and just seeing what he was buying and why and what he was
Mhm.
talking about. And his story arc is a very interesting one in itself, and I won't get into that too much. But at the time, he was a really kind of curious character, and he started saying, via his Twitter, does anybody know how to write a comic? Is there any writers out there? And we followed each other at the time on Twitter, and I just DM'd him. I was like, yeah, I'm a writer. I've done comic book work before. What do you need? And he's like, right, okay. Here, talk to my friend, and we'll figure things out. And his friend was G Funk or G
Mhm.
Funker, and we started talking, and then that's how the Punks comic kind of came about. And
Mhm.
I started working with those guys and Chris Wall, the artist, and
Mhm.
we just kind of hit the road running. They wanted to get the comic out and published and ready for mint before the first, I think it was Sotheby's Punks auction, and
Mhm.
that was quite a big thing in the calendar. And this was
Yeah.
like maybe, yeah, again, early, first quarter 2020.
Did you
And
did you get your punk from Beanie? Because I know he gave
no,
punks to all of the people involved in it, didn't he?
well, I don't think so.
Uh, no.
Not that I'm aware of, at least. Anyway, no. I mean, like
Mm.
he and G Funker shared the original wallet that had the 12 punks, which were featured in the comic book.
Mhm.
But Chris and I didn't have punks to begin with. I'm not sure if Chris has one to this day. I'm not sure how they ended up
I'm not sure
delegating.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they ended up delegating the 12 punks which are featured in the comic. But
Mhm.
at the time, I was punkless, and at the time, the cost of punks was rapidly increasing. But it was about, I think, the floor was about $30,000 or $40,000, something like
Mhm.
this. And I was like, the most that I'd spent on on an NFT at that point was, maybe 10 or 15,000. And I was like, because I'd sold my Beeple, I'd made a bit of money off that, I'd flipped a few things on Nifty Gateway, I'd collected a pretty nice little collection of really beautiful digital art, and I knew that I had some pretty nice investments there. And then after doing the Punks comic, I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to pull the trigger on this. And it was as the floor was like starting to skyrocket. And I got my Punk 5046 for 23 ETH at the time, which was about
Nice.
70,000, about $70,000.
Mm.
And that was like a combination of some money that I'd made kind of selling art via Nifty Gateway or via OpenSea, some of my own work that I'd sold, some of the money or some of the ETH that I'd made via the Punks comic and a couple of other things. And I was like, you know what? I've got the feeling that this space is very much about conviction. and about, kind of chips on the table, cards down, all in, sort of go for broke.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly, and it's, and it started to dawn on me the power that was behind that digital personification of your real life self, the profile picture. And so I decided to buy the punk, and it's by far and away being the best investment I've ever made in my entire life. It's been amazing for not even necessarily monetary reasons, but the community that I've been able to kind of belong to and be part of since then has just been incredible. And that was April 2020, I think. So a couple of years ago now, and it's just been a complete roller coaster since then. So that's a
I
very
always
long
thought you had your punk before me, man.
Oh, really? So when did you get yours?
I think summer 2020.
Yeah. So mine was I think April, May 2020. So
2020. Okay.
yeah. Oh no, sorry, no, 2021. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. So you got yours before mine for sure.
Maybe I didn't know who was in, who was out the first days there, and I didn't join the punks Discord um actively. I mean, so yeah, I thought everybody was before me.
Yeah.
I felt new. I still feel new to it compared to some other people. Man, you mentioned a lot of people, and it is a common thing on this podcast that we have a lot of people talking about that sale, the big sale, how it brought them into the NFTs, or around that time that this was the main catalyst that pushed them towards this journey. And even though I was a little bitch and I always said, it doesn't matter these sales, I completely changed my mind because, like, I have experienced firsthand how many people this sale brought in, and all what was happening then, and people was in the epicenter. So yeah, I was wrong about that. It brought tons of people into the space. I remember I was liking People's art before the drops, and I was talking to Bartasian. I just met him back then, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, I cannot wait if Beeple does NFTs," you know. And he was like, "Who was Beeple?" And back then he made that little artwork with Trump riding a bull or something.
Yeah.
And that was really epic. And I showed him that. And then 2 months later, he had a drop on Nifty Gateway. It was surreal.
Yeah.
It was crazy times.
Yeah.
I even told Luca. Luca got one of the $1 ones, and he sold it for a puny profit.
Yeah, I think I flipped my my Into the Ether for I think $10,000. Well, not flipped it. I was kind of paying attention to what was going on Nifty Gateway, and at the time, for a short period, my sale of the Into the Ether on Nifty Gateway was the highest secondary market sale of any people. And I thought I was like a genius. I thought I was like, I'm a digital crypto art dealer.
I'm a fucking savant, bro. I got this shit.
Yeah, honestly, I thought I was Larry Gagosian. I was like, check me out, man. I'm an art dealer. I'm an art dealer now.
I love it, man. I can totally relate to that.
But do you know what the ridiculous thing was? And honestly, it made me feel sick because I sold that for $10,000. And I remember walking down the street and I was like, look at me, there's this English phrase, Billy Big Bollocks, and you just think you're like the best fucking guy in the world. And I'm walking down the street thinking that I'm amazing. And then about a month later, he does the Everyday's drop, and it sells for $69 million. And the floor for Into the Ether was $170,000. And I felt sick. I felt absolutely sick. I was like, what just happened? Wait a minute. Uh, I went from like, thinking, having the biggest head in the world and this big ego, thinking, oh yeah, I'm making money selling crypto art, to realizing just how little that I actually knew about the space and what was going on and the potential. And that's when I really started digging. So yeah, it was,
But that was so unpredictable, man. Like
yeah,
I was into the space long time when that drop happened, and I was
yeah,
like, man, like 1 month later, like the price is gonna be so cheap, nobody's going to remember it, and
yeah.
like the mint is so high, like there's just not enough people,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Went a little bit differently, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm such an idiot.
I think
Uh,
everybody, in this space, everybody's got one of those stories. Everybody's
mm,
got to kind of cut their teeth on the I sold too soon,
mm,
or I missed the top, or whatever. It's kind of part of the process, a little bit of being involved in crypto.
yeah.
And it's the roller coaster ride that you take, and it's part of being a degen, basically. But
Yeah, but it is unhealthy to think that you only have to sell tops,
well,
and
exactly,
it's
and
like
exactly. I couldn't agree more. That's
yeah,
exactly what I was going to say.
it's a slippery slope, man.
It is a very slippery slope, and that's when you start, people start gambling and start losing money because
Mm.
they
You win and you
start-
still feel like you lost.
exactly, yeah. And it's the old phrase is, buy the art that you love with the money that you can afford, and if you like it, then you'll never lose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I chose to do at the beginning, when I was buying stuff on Nifty Gateway, because I knew a lot of the artists. But then I got involved with the FOMO and the hype a little bit, and
Yeah. You went
luckily I
into
never
the
made
dark side.
yeah, luckily I never made really any too many stupid decisions, and
Yeah.
I made a little bit of ETH, I lost a bit of ETH, whatever. But I've seen people who got really into it and were like trying to day trade on OpenSea, basically.
Mm.
At the peak hype in JPEG summer of 2021. And there was insane amounts of kind of ETH flowing around for all sorts of different
Yeah.
projects, and
That was
10,000
insane.
PFP projects were selling out daily. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
millions and millions and millions of dollars were, and thousands and thousands of ETH were exchanging hands on a daily basis, and it got pretty crazy. But I kind of, I took a breath and was like, right, okay, not gonna go crazy here. I'm not a whale. I don't have like crazy ETH stocked away from getting in early on the IPO or whatever. I'm a regular guy, and I'll buy what I can afford with the ETH that I've got, and I'll buy the art that I like. And if it goes up, great. And if it doesn't, I've got this amazing art. And that was kind of the play that I've always taken.
Did you buy any super rare X copies?
No, I
Mm.
started to learn a little bit more about Xcopy as I
Mm.
kind of started engaging in the space a little bit more. And funnily enough, I live in Manchester these days, but at the time I was kind of living down in the south near London. And I'd come up to Manchester to visit some friends, and I'd been on LinkedIn, trying to look for people that worked for various platforms like Super Rare. And I ended up finding out that Known Origin are based in Manchester.
Mm.
And so I sent the Known Origin guys, a message, the founders, Andy and the other guys, a couple of messages on LinkedIn. I was like, "Hey, I'm part of this space. I'm interested in what you guys are doing. Do you want to meet up for a beer?" So I came up to Manchester, and we all went out for a drink. And that's when I started to get to know a little bit more about the intricacies of the space, I guess, because those guys have been around in it for ages. They're all
Yeah.
devs, and they've been in crypto for a long time, and they were really, really interesting to talk to. And I know a couple of them because Xcopy also minted some very early work and a couple of editions on Known Origin. And
Mm.
then that's when those guys were like, "Oh, we don't have any." Like, I remember one of the guys saying, "Oh, I missed out on punks, but I've got a couple of X copies stored away." And it was really interesting times because again, the PFP craze was kicking off and projects were selling out in a matter of minutes rather than days or months as it is these days. And it was a kind of a different space back then. So as I got more into the space, I started expanding my knowledge away from kind of just digital artists and into kind of crypto artists, if that makes sense. And I think Xcopy is obviously one of the very early crypto artists that you could really call like a kind of a real crypto artist because he's been minting for so long, and that was integral to his style and ethos and aesthetic.
Yeah, man. It's sometimes it's a little bit demoralizing to see all those projects that had like thousands of ETH of revenue. They died quietly. Nobody cares, and like the quality projects are being completely overlooked. It can feel frustrating, especially nowadays when we are experiencing such a depression on the market. What are your thoughts? Like, how do you see things going? Because right now it looks really bleak. Nothing is minting. People aren't using the network for NFTs, and there's like immense sell pressure everywhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously I was around just before the peak, and then I was lucky enough to kind of experience JPEG Summer in 2021 and the kind of the frenzy that we had there.
Yeah.
I was around for the start of 2022 when ETH hit $4,200, Bitcoin was at 69,000. It was
was a good times.
Yeah, it was a good time. And then I kind of was around for all the domino effect of all the collapses that we saw late last year. From around this time last year, going into all the way through to December, and ultimately with FTX imploding and the fallout from that, and then coming into this year and it just being like, shit, it's quiet around here. Like, what's happening? And people didn't really know what to do. Everybody was like, no, it's going to come back. Oh, it's just a bear market, and it'll last a couple of months. But I had this feeling. I was like, we had JPEG summer, but this is going to be JPEG winter, and it's going to crawl along for a little bit. And actually, I had a lot of friends in the space who were like, no, I'm not going to drop something because I'm going to wait for the bull to come back, and I'm going to wait for this, and I'm going to wait for that. And I'm like, guys, that was a time and a place. And I think, the cycle is real, and we probably will experience, or we almost certainly will experience another bull run, but it could be years away. And don't like sit on your hands in the meantime. As they say, bears are for builders, and don't go away. It's, the market is quieter, but this isn't. I don't really see it as a bear market. I see it as the new normal. I see this kind of the situation that we're in at the moment, or where the market is at, is not necessarily a bear as far as I kind of see it. It's more the norm. What was extraordinary and what was, very what's the word that I'm looking for, out of out of the terms of general reality, was the peak that we saw and the colossal kind of skyrocket. The blow off top that we saw in 2021, that was insane. And now we leveled off, and it feels like a bottom at the moment. And I think I follow a fair few smart people on Twitter, or at least I think they're reasonably smart, and they're kind of saying, yeah, this is kind of the bottom, and it'll come back. But I think this is kind of the new norm. And one of the things that keeps me going whilst it's quiet around here, I guess, or quieter or normal, is two things really: the amazing art that I still see every day, and the amazing, people are still making sales. Art still sells. It's not like people are just minting random shit and it's selling for tens of thousands of dollars. but you've still got incredible artists making amazing sales. And just to blow my own trumpet a little bit, but one of the collaborative pieces that I do for one of my projects, Tales from the Glitch, just sold for 2.5 ETH last week to an amazing artist and collector. And so, the market is still moving to a degree, but it's not, what we, had previously experienced, but there's still collectors and there's still people there. And then the other thing that keeps me going is it's one of these, the more things change, the more things stay the same sort of attitudes. I was around in Web 2 and social media very early in like 2005, 2006. And I started working for a startup company, a marketing agency in 2006 as a blog writer, basically. And at the time, I was hired as a creative copywriter. And I was writing blog posts for big companies, basically, who hired our agency to write their blogs for them. And at the time, I remember trying to think, what do I put on my CV? Do I put creative copywriter? Do I put blog poster? Do I put... And then after a couple of months, it became clear that I was actually learning quite a lot from the marketing guys in the agency. And there was this new thing called social media, which was going to be really big. And that's how I became a social media strategist. And I did that professionally before I quit and went full-time with Web3. I did that professionally for 15 years. And I remember back in 2006, 2007, when I was, on Twitter and Instagram didn't even exist. I was working on Facebook, creating apps. I was writing blog posts for people. And I remember talking to my friends and they're going, what do you do? This doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to write on something called Twitter what you've just had for lunch? Who cares? It's bullshit. I don't get it. And same thing happening, or has been happening and is still continuing to happen with crypto, NFTs, Web3. These days, people are going, why would you buy a JPEG? It doesn't make any sense. Like, what do you mean there's like a marketplace for buying and selling digital art? What do you mean you've got a $70,000 PFP? It's people, but what happened with Facebook, with Instagram, with YouTube, how big that went. I remember, being early enough into YouTube that if you had 10,000 views, that was a viral video, and I remember being around when I think it was Gangnam Style got the first billion views on a video. And so when I came into Web3 and started learning more about it, I was like, right, this is something interesting here that I've seen before with Web2, and it's an evolution and it's not going anywhere. Just because the market is a bit quieter than it was in 2021 when we saw the global top and the blow off, it doesn't mean, the technology is going away. It doesn't mean people are going to stop developing. It doesn't mean people are stopping using Ethereum or Bitcoin. It just means that, the hype and the gambling that we saw during JPEG summer in 2021 and the start of 2022 has died down a little bit, but it's not going anywhere. And this is why I have like long-term conviction, basically, is that, this is a paradigm shift. It is an evolution of a technology which is going to become pervasive throughout the world and everybody will be using. I remember when QR codes came around and everyone was like, what the fuck is this? Why would I scan a barcode with my mobile phone? It doesn't make any sense. And now they're everywhere on everything and you use them every day. And, same with social media. Like I remember people saying, why would I post a selfie on Instagram? Like what that's, it doesn't make any sense. Why would I upload? And it's everywhere. Everyone's got an Instagram. And the
Or
same
with
thing,
video games. Why would someone play video games online and now they're millionaires?
Oh God, yeah, exactly, man. I mean, I played Counter-Strike and Team Fortress Classic way back in the late 90s. I was part of like
me too, Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I was a part of like a gaming kind of community, and I had a 56K modem, and my ping was about 200. But I still loved sniping people on Counter Strike, and I remember again, like you say, at the time, people were like, "What do you mean you play games online?" how do you what?
Yeah, it
I
was
don't
more
get it.
about the LAN party back then.
Yeah. And I used to go to LAN parties. I've always been a nerd, basically. So,
Yeah.
so I've seen it. I've seen, and that was, that was Web one. That was the
Mm,
original kind of when the internet started being big, and you just used to use the internet to look at websites and buy things, basically. And even buying things was hard. And then social media came around, and you started interacting with people via websites. And then you had social media platforms, and then Web three comes around, and you've got the blockchain and smart contracts, and you're able to, have self custody of your be your own bank and have decentralization and all of this sort of stuff. So it's just an evolution, and it's not going anywhere. So when people go, "Oh, I lost money on Bitcoin or whatever," it's like, okay, zoom out, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint, and if you're going to be in the space, then you've got to be able to experience the lows as well as take the highs.
yeah, exactly, man. Do you think the AI now stole the spotlight a little bit from the NFTs? Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
technology people are more interested in everything AI now. NFTs is the old thing.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's been really interesting watching that, because obviously the VC money has and the Eye of Sauron has very much moved from NFTs and over to AI.
That's
It's like
such a good analogy.
it's like, in Lord of the Rings, when somebody puts the ring on and you just see the eye move across the landscape, and it's like, where's the money at? Where's the new big thing? Where's the next big ticket? And
Mm,
obviously, it's very much on AI. The interesting thing, though, is that the AI, ChatGPT, GPT apps, Midjourney, etc., it is kind of also not parallel exactly, but it works with Web3 and the blockchain, and
mm.
and what we've got with NFTs. Obviously, there is a crossover because you're able to produce things with this technology, which then you can sell as digital assets via the blockchain. So there is an element of crossover there, and it's again only going to become more pervasive and more integral or intricate integrated to our lives. And yeah, it's going to be another kind of wave or another part of the cycle, I believe. But yeah, the spotlight has kind of been put on the AI evolution revolution that we're going through at the moment, and that's going to take the next year or so for the kind of the craziness to happen, and then for the dust to settle, and we'll see where we come out. I think maybe in a year or two.
It's gonna have its cycle.
Yeah, yeah.
What can you tell us about Galbraith Labs?
Yeah, Galbraith. Good question. Um, well, like I said, uh, I worked in marketing for a long time as a social media strategist, and I did a lot of things doing that. But I was always a writer, and I had my first, like I mentioned, I had my first novel out in 2009, and then went from there and did a lot of collaborative work. When I came into the space in late 2020, early 2021, I was still working in marketing then as a social media strategist, and I was kind of juggling. I've always juggled two jobs basically. It's always been my thing because I've always had my day job, which I
Hmm.
spent in front of a computer working in marketing, and I've always had my evening job. My evening job has been writing. And whether that's like sitting down working on a novel or writing blog posts or working on short stories or collaborations or whatever, my evenings, my entire adult life have always been spent writing basically. A couple of beers here and there, obviously, but most of the time writing. And when I started getting involved in this space, like I said, because I'd seen what had happened with Web 2 and I got in very early on that, I thought, you know what, maybe there's an opportunity here for me to do something. And that's when I started making my own projects and minting my own work and working on other projects as like a narrative designer or a writer or a lore creator or whatever you want to call it. And it got to the point January last year where I was able to quit my day job, quit my normie job, my Web 2 job, and go full time Web 3. and I've been doing that ever since. And so basically, I thought, well, everything is a labs these days, like Lava Labs, Yuga Labs, labs everywhere. So I
So
was like, well,
Galbraith Labs.
yeah, why not Galbraith Labs?
I love it.
And that's kind of my little company, my little business that is
Nice.
just a business of one at the moment, which is just me. But that's facilitates me working across my own stuff as well as other things.
That's the best size, man.
Yeah, I don't want any other responsibility. It's hard enough dealing with me day to day, let alone other employees.
It's very hard to keep the lights on, especially under these market conditions.
Yeah.
Team of one, it's really good.
Yeah.
Very flexible.
It makes life a little bit easier, put it that way.
Yeah, for sure, man. The space is not yet ready for, I would say, Web3 publishing and print media, what we call mint media, with our
Yeah.
studios platform. Do you think that this will change? Will people treat mint media, print media as like artworks with like a sequential narrative? Or is it going to be treated like cheap books forever?
It's a really interesting question, a very tough one to answer, I think, because there's like lots of different things at play, and it's this idea that at the moment, still in 2023, the barriers to entry for NFTs and crypto in general are still pretty high. The idea of a normie, somebody like my brother or even my mum and dad, getting a MetaMask and figuring out what a seed phrase is and looking at self custody and decentralization and all of this sort of stuff is still a little outside of everyday person kind of day to day routine, if that makes sense.
It's a bit
It took
far.
it took a while. It took many years for all of my friends and family to catch up with me on social media platforms. Like I said,
Takes a
being on Twitter,
decade.
yeah, being on Twitter since 2007. Twitter wasn't pervasive and a big news item. The news, the mainstream media, the news, BBC, Sky, CNN, they quote tweets every day on their global news channels, and that didn't start happening until maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like this. So you're talking a decade for it to become pervasive. And when that, when the barriers to entry start to lower, then you'll start to see these mass audiences start to move in as they did with social media, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And then once that starts to happen, then you'll start to see, I think, a real revolution in publishing at that point. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember the death of magazines, and I'm old enough to remember buying weekly music magazines, physical kind of.
But that's a misconception, though. I've made a lot of research, and print media never died, and
Yeah.
it's doing surprisingly well. People appreciate print media because they love the medium
Yes.
nowadays more
No,
than they love the information that they get out of it.
I totally agree with that, and I totally get where you're coming from. But I think what I'm trying to, I guess, express or kind of talk about is this idea of, I remember, say for instance, there's NME in the UK or Kerrang magazine. Kerrang was a weekly heavy metal rock music magazine that I bought in the UK as a teenager growing up, and that's where I get my posters out of every week and put them up on my bedroom wall. And that would sell hundreds of thousands of physical copies every week. That doesn't happen anymore. People like buying magazines, and I still like buying magazines, and I get The Economist and New Scientist and some like Dazed and Confused every now and again. but the numbers are drastically different to what they were in the 90s. And
that's for sure.
It's still around, but in a different way. And as we see, as we've seen that evolution from people only buying physical copies of music magazines to people going on websites, to people going on the magazine's social media, to people kind of coming back around again and using a bit of everything and occasionally buying the physical. I think the Web3 publishing, or uh, era is going to come alongside and be part of that industry or kind of world. It's like
I really hope, man. I really hope.
It's like, how does how do I, as a consumer, consume my content, my media? And like I said, I spend most of my time online in front of the big screen during the day. I spend a huge amount of my time on the small screen, on the third screen, as they used to call it, on my mobile, consuming social media. And then I spend a degree of that, also a little bit of my, hard-earned money or ETH buying online publications every now and again, but then also buying physical copies of magazines. And the Web3 part of that ecosystem is going to, I think, only expand, but it's going to take a while. It's zoom out. It's going to take years rather than months.
Well, so far in Web3, the only successful publication has been the punk comic. Nothing else did that well or sold well.
But I mean, like the punks comic was not an instant sellout either. I mean, I was there. I remember launching it, and on mint day we only sold like 3,500 of the 10,000 that were available for the original mint, and then it was a very, very gradual mint out. And even then, I remember, as a writer, I was like, "Oh, this is amazing! We're going to sell 10,000 of these comics." But then we sold, when it launched, it sold 3,500, and it was they slowly minted out from that point on.
Yeah,
and
also, then Vinny shoved it in everybody's throats in punk Discord like non-stop. It was all about this comic book, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, like I won't comment on that myself, but he was a very good hype man. Let's put it that way. And and it was it was an interesting time. But I was also, at the time, I was thinking, I remember very much being at the forefront of my mind, are people buying this because they want to flip it and they want to make money, or are people buying this because it's a comic book and they want to read it? And that's also been, the challenge as a writer. I'm sure you'll have experienced yourself in the space.
Nobody reads, man. That is the problem.
Yeah. Well, this is the
reads.
thing. Do you know what I was going to say, actually? And this is quite relevant because I had like a bit of an epiphany last year when I quit my day job and started going full time with the Web3 stuff. And I remember thinking, I was starting to build a little bit of a platform for myself. I think I just hit 10,000 followers on Twitter. I was starting to get a little bit of engagement. It was starting to become fun. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I can do something here. And I remember it dawning on me that it wasn't my job as a writer to try and sell literature or writing NFTs to degens. It was my job as a writer to try and bring in readers from Web2 to this new space and to try to get them involved in a new entertainment and content form.
Yeah, that's the most sustainable route.
Yeah, and that's
the blue ocean.
That's really, really hard. Trying to convince people, because it not only
only art blocks did that effectively.
Yeah, not only is it like extremely hard to get kind of Joe blogs on the streets to with all the like I was saying, with all the barriers to entry to kind of Web3 publishing that normal people have to go through to, get a MetaMask and load it with ETH and bridge to optimism and blah blah blah. But but also we're fighting a bit of an uphill struggle because crypto has made a bit of a name for itself, as we're all aware. And sometimes it can be a bit of a dirty word when you're talking to, you know, you meet some guy down the pub like I do occasionally when I go out and read my book, and you get chatting to somebody and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And sometimes I have to judge, oh, do I say that I work in NFTs and crypto, or do I say that I'm a writer, or
do,
it
do I
could
open that box?
exactly, because sometimes you say it and people just turn around and walk away, and sometimes people are really interested, and that's part of the struggle that we have to go through as well. But again, I remember going through the same stuff when I used to talk about Twitter and MySpace and Facebook and YouTube. I remember people going, "What is that? I don't get it." And I remember explaining it to my parents and my grandparents when I was in my early 20s about there's this new thing and it's called social media, and you upload pictures to it or videos to the internet and people watch them and share comments and things like that. And nobody got it then. And so this is why I've kind of got this long-term conviction, because I have seen it happen to a degree with all the Web2 stuff. And I feel that the evolution will continue to take place with the Web3 side of things as well.
Yeah, man, that's also our long-term bet to education and like Web3 publishing and exploring the book as an art medium,
Yeah.
not as a product.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle, as you say. We will see how it goes. We are super excited. Um, Working hard right now, putting more prints and stuff ready for Lisbon. So yeah, it will be exciting, man. Looking forward to that. Actually, it's going to be such a cool event. But I think on this one, the difference is going to be that the main um, flow of people will be around the conference because it's like in such a good location, as opposed to like New York or Paris, where it was all about the side events.
Yeah.
More segmented.
Yeah. No, I agree. Really looking forward to it myself, and it's going to be an interesting one, because it seems like as well with this one, the people that are going to be showing up are artists and entrepreneurs and degens, rather than with New York, it's obviously a massive event. You got and it is it for mostly for people like us who are very kind of part of the space. It's about the side events, but the main event in New York is kind of just, well, it's a conference. I know it's like any other conference where you kind of got rooms you can go and see people talk, and there's lots of stalls and booths and people trying to sell you stuff. But with the Lisbon thing, it seems like there's going to be a really interesting group of artists and characters coming together to share their experiences and have some fun.
Exactly, and we are right in the middle of bear market, so
Yeah.
it's going to be super fun,
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely looking forward to it. I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we close out, man. This was such an interesting talk.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it has been interesting. No, I mean, nothing in particular. Just like, if you don't know me, follow me on Twitter, I guess. Give me a follow, and my DMs are always open. I'm always very curious to talk to people about what they're doing in the space, why they're here, and if they've got any inquiries as to what I do, and if they can help them, then yeah, just get in touch. Like I said, when I got that initial response from Beeple back in 2018 about writing short stories to his work and his enthusiasm for wanting to do that, I've always tried to pay that forward. And I've always tried to remember that whatever's happened in the space, that, a short DM can change a life, and can make somebody's day and make somebody's year, as it did with me and my life, I guess. So yeah, slip into the DMs if you want to chat. And yeah, as they say, the real NFTs are the friends that we make along the way.
Exactly, right on, man. Thank you so much for coming, and we will definitely have some beers in Portugal. I'm gonna invite you back on the show later on this year at some point. Chat with you, see where you are in life at the time, what you're up to.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'd love to jump back on, and thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for coming in. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. Much love, guys. Thanks for hanging out and coming to our shows. Gazette 140. The Toys Are Pudgy cover is available for 0.01 ETH. So, yeah, if you want to support us, go check it out. We have a Samba exhibition ongoing by Filtered Art, a project by OMZ, a fellow punk. Definitely check it out. It's about discoverability and having your art in a nice scroll. And we are doing this Samba Brazilian tribute collection. So every week we have a Brazilian artist. Definitely check it out. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take good care. Bye bye.
Thanks again. Cheers, guys.